Thank you so much to everybody that's joining our panel discussion, and especially thank you to our panelists and our panel moderator. For folks who don't know, I'm Jasmine Dennis. I'm the membership chair for the NC chapter of NOMA. Before we get started, I'll just go through some housekeeping items just on behalf of the chapter. Obviously, first and foremost, if you're not currently a member of NC NOMA, please consider joining. We have excellent programs available for our non-members, but even better ones for our members. Also, if you are already a member, then I highly encourage you to we have a lot of volunteer opportunities for members to help us put on the awesome events and initiatives that we hold throughout the year and beyond. So if you are interested in becoming a member or volunteering as a member for NCNOMA, then just shoot an email to ncnoma@gmail.com. A couple events that we have coming up tomorrow is our Creatives and Cocktails event in celebration of Women's History Month. I believe that registration, I think, is still open until end of day today. So do that as soon as possible. It's all open to everyone. It's just in celebration for Women's History Month, but the event is open to everyone and anyone. Next, we'll have another passing in conjunction with VA NOMA. We're going to have another passing the torch event in recognition of Arab American Heritage Month. That'll be in April. Then also in April, we're having a book drive event for the book What is Architecture? And that'll be towards the end of April. I think April 27th in particular. I think that is all the housekeeping items that I have. So we'll get started with the panel discussion. I'll do some brief intros. Our panel moderator is Dan Harrop. Please tell me if I'm if I'm completely botching your name. So Dan, he'll be our panel moderator, and he's a senior associate at LS3P. Our panelists include Johannes Kettler, and he is a team leader for architecture and urban design and planning at City Collective. We also have Foad Faizi, and he is a principal and co-founder of Studio Archibene. And last but not least, we have Marsha McDonald, and she is an architectural staff member with Little Diversified. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Dan, and we'll get started.
Hey, thank you, Jasmine. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. Really excited for this panel. I think we've got some really good information we're going to hopefully give to you guys, and obviously we'll take some questions at the end if we have some time. So I'm just going to give a little brief bio of myself.
Oh, Dan, sorry. I'm so sorry to stop your flow. One thing I did want to mention is that just to make it very clear for everybody, we are not immigration lawyers. We are not on behalf of the HR department of any local, national, federal organizations or firms. So we're just here sharing the stories and the journeys of our panelists and our panel moderators. So grain of salt, that's all. You have we'll have a follow-up event probably in April as well, or maybe in May, that will include some folks from NCARB or other licensure professionals that you might be able to get some more official advice from. But just want to put that disclaimer out there. Right, go for it, Dan.
Yeah, but no, it's an important disclaimer because I am absolutely not a lawyer. You can not take any legal advice from me. So anyway, without further ado, so my name's Dan Harrop. As Jasmine mentioned, I'm a senior associate here at LS3P in our Raleigh office. I'm from Manchester, just outside Manchester in England, and I kind of lived there all my life. Went to school there, did university in Manchester, and then worked there for a few years, and kind of on some small custom residential projects, smaller commercial projects. And in 2013, I had the fantastic opportunity to come over to the US with my wife, who is an academic over in UNC. Speaking of March Madness, as we were talking about it a second ago. So we moved out here to Los Angeles, and I continued to work on, again, similar typologies, to similar types of projects. It was actually an opportunity I'd hoped to try and leave the industry, but it just clogged me right back in. So, just kind of funny the way things go. And then in 2015, she had the opportunity to move over to UNC here in North Carolina. So we made that move, started a family, bought a house, did all of that good stuff, the way life moves on. And as I mentioned, now a senior associate with LS3P, have been here for all these years since 2015. So yeah, it's been a kind of a crazy little ride here as we've gone over the last 11 years. It seems just crazy, and I couldn't believe we were supposed to be here for a year, ended up being 11 and beyond. But as I said, we've got some great panelists here. We're able to take some questions and talk about our experiences in the industry, you know, in life in general, and hopefully we'll find this really informative. So I actually used to work with Johannes. Johannes was a colleague of mine here at LS3P up until recently. So I'm going to pass it off to Johannes. We have a similar, you know, Europeans, or at least I guess we're European.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Yeah, there's no comment there. We'll move on. But I'll let Johannes kind of give a little bit of his story, and we'll kind of keep the conversation going. So, Johannes.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks, NOMA, for hosting this, and for you moderating, and everybody who's come to visit us and listen. So my name is Johannes Kettler. I'm originally from Germany, which is where I studied architecture for a total of 6 years. Back in the day, I graduated in 2009 from Bauhaus University in Germany with my architecture degree, which is kind of a master's, or not kind of, it's like a master level. It's just not called that. And I worked. Sorry, I missed one thing. I did also spend a year in Japan. That doesn't really matter right now, but I studied a year in Tokyo in between. But after graduating from architecture, even in the architecture studies, I was starting to get interested beyond the scale of buildings. And sorry, I'm getting a lot of kind of noise.
Yeah, I'm also hearing the feedback. Is it, Dan, do you mind, could you mute and see if that helps it, maybe?
No, it's okay. I can just talk over. I started working in Spain for a little bit after graduating, but I had the opportunity to go and study city and regional planning here in the US quite soon after I graduated from architecture. So I was in Spain for about a year, and then moved up to upstate New York, studied city and regional planning at Cornell. The scholarship I got then kind of required me to go back to Germany, which I did. I worked in Berlin for 3-4 years in architecture, and there I met my previous partner, who was born and raised in North Carolina, went to NC State, but had been in Berlin for a few years, and we at some point decided that it could be interesting for both of us to try to make the move to North Carolina. And from that time, that was in 2016, I worked in Raleigh at Mainz Architecture. I'm as a project designer, as an architect. And then a few years ago, I had the opportunity to start kind of a slightly separate track to be an urban designer, which was what I did at LS3P. And just a few months ago, we started a new firm here in Raleigh that has its roots in Australia, actually, but we are now also here in the US, and that's called City Collective. And yeah, I am not licensed in any way. I was kind of close to, well, I had all the requirements fulfilled to be licensed in Germany, but that was just when I moved, which was, you know, you can call that slightly unsmart. But I'm in the US. I now have my AXP hours all good. I have paid the fee for the EESA evaluation, but where I'm currently a little bit stuck is getting the original transcripts from my German degree translated in a way and applied in a way that the system here wants it to, just for a little bit of background.
Yeah, so what experiences, what kind of challenges do you think, Johannes, kind of moving, having studied kind of in both countries, is there anything there that you think is sort of really interesting or different? I mean, I know, as I didn't mention earlier, I was licensed, or I am licensed in both the UK and here in North Carolina, and the licensure exams are very different. Very different way of kind of examining and thinking and testing. Is there anything that you kind of felt was different, similar? What kind of is?
I mean, I knew what I was getting myself into, but the licensing system here is very different to the other two countries where I have a little bit more knowledge, which is in Germany. You graduate from architecture school, and the requirement is that you work with a licensed architect for 2 years, and then you basically just send in a letter with a signed letter of your licensed mentor to prove that you did that and what you worked on, and you create a little portfolio, and then it's usually getting approved. In Spain, it's different. Again, in Spain, you are kind of presenting a full comprehensive understanding of architectural projects in your final project in school. So when you graduate from architecture school, you're immediately licensed, which has its other ups and downs, like drawbacks or advantages. And then in comparison to all of that in the US, obviously it's very different, and a whole kind of catalog of requirements that you have to work through. So it's from all the places I know, it's definitely the one with the highest requirements to get licensed.
Yeah, Marsha, maybe we can kind of bring you in, because I know that you've had some experience of this, having worked for a long time, again, not having your licensure, but also interestingly, with Johannes, with the urban design, your experience, your love for communities, love for culture as part of your practice. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that, as well as maybe touch on the licensure stuff, if that's something that's interesting to you as part of this conversation.
Absolutely. So, hi everyone, I'm Marsha McDonald. So I'm from Jamaica, and so I did my education in Jamaica at the Caribbean School of Architecture, and then hopped over to Florida and did my master's at Florida International University. And I have a little bit of a unique path because I was exposed to working in both countries, in both spaces, and did more of a research kind of route as well. And so I was vacillating between getting licensed and getting a doctorate, and so the whole process afforded me some very unique opportunities where I also professors, so I taught architecture and graphics design, and then my research was focused on communities and culture, and how culture is translated in architecture, especially in the Caribbean and Latin America. So I took a very different route, and then circled back to deciding to hop into the field where I'm encouraging all my students, go get licensed. And here I am, not yet licensed. And hence the decision in the last few years just to buckle down and focus on getting licensed. So the process has been a very full one, I would say, but I've learned quite a bit along the way. So in my transition from Jamaica to Florida, I had to go through the process of them, translating my degree Even though I come from an English-speaking country, they were still looking at my credits and the level of work that I do. Coincidentally, in Jamaica, what we do is the basis of the RIBA. So we're quite similar to the RIBA process of the mentoring and the documentation and then the exam. And then I'm jumping over here into the US and have to learn this new system and learn this new process. So I hope that gives a little bit more information, in what different countries and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I think as we've been sort of talking, and preparing for this, mentorship is another thing that's important to you and interesting to you. And again, Foad as well. Maybe we can bring Foad into this conversation of mentorship. Maybe Marsha, just before we bring Foad in, you could kind of speak to that a little bit. And is there anybody or any person that you think has helped, who's kind of helped within that transition, and how you then mentored other people? So yeah, that might be interesting to the.
Sure. I had the privilege and the honor of being introduced to some great architects in the Caribbean and as well as in the US. One of my mentors, she actually just got published in 100 women architects. And so she sat us down. She was the dean of the Caribbean School of Architecture. She had her practice, and she sat us down and she asked us, "Do we want to be architects?" And I actually said yes, I want to be an architect. And then she asked all of us in the office, really what we wanted to do in terms of family. It was really very comprehensive, and so 20 years after that conversation, she sends me a message. Are you an architect yet? And I said, well, no, I'm not yet one. And she says, then why are you not one? And she's been a constant encourager throughout my process. And it's very interesting because even in applying for a job, even in going for interviews, I send her a message, hey, I'm doing this. What do you think? And she would give me some guidance and direction as to how to present myself, and what to say. And it's very wonderful to have that mentoring aspect when you have someone who is following you through your career and helping you navigate, places that she has already gone. And I do the same for my students. When I was teaching, I would sit down and encourage them and ask them exactly the same question. Do you want to be an architect? And look at where they are and where they want to go. And I have the same privilege here at Little, where I help to mentor the ones who are just coming out of college. And had a conversation with one the other day, and asked her, where do you want to go? How do you want to do this? And she's like, well, I don't want to go back to school, but I need to. And I said, well, maybe you don't, So these conversations help us along, our journey.
Great, thanks. So Foad, coming to you, I mean, you've probably, of the four of us, have taken the leap that many architects aspire to. Right? You set out on your own company. It's fantastic. Congratulations. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience and sort of how you got from where you started to kind of where you are now?
Sure. Well, hello everyone. I'm Faizi. I'm from Iran. My wife and I decided to move to the US and study architecture here. Actually, I had my master's degree in landscape architecture back home, but here I got my master's degree in architecture from NC State University. And then after graduation, I joined Gensler and then Perkins & Will for 5-6 years, and then Perkins Eastman for 3 years in Raleigh office. And then last year, my business partner, Kenneth Luger, and I decided to start our own practice. But as you can imagine, coming to a country as an immigrant and then studying getting a job, getting licensed, and then starting your own business is quite challenging. The thing that helped me the most was my wife and I are both architects, so sometimes we usually share the pain. That helps a lot through the process and the journey. But as you mentioned, yeah, having a mentor helps a lot, both for personal and professional growth, actually. Because here in the US, there's a lot of new things that you need to learn. For me, especially starting with the school, how the system works, how the actual university plans for all the courses and everything else. That was quite challenging to understand, and also performance at a really high level. So people helped me a lot during the school, especially, for example, for me, it was mostly Robin Abrams at the College of Design that she helped me a lot to understand, me and my wife, to understand this and go through everything with us. That was really helpful for us. And then after graduation, starting to work somewhere, that was quite challenging, especially not just for the professional environment, but also all the legal stuff behind the scene, like changing your visa from student to work visa and then changing it to permanent resident. So through that, I was lucky enough to have some great friends to help me with that, to understand the process and streamline that. And then, as you all mentioned, getting licensed is another challenge as an international practitioner here. For me, because I was licensed back home before coming to the US, but then I noticed that we cannot transfer that to here, so we need to go through the same thing again here with getting licensed. And as Marsha said, it's quite different, basically. It's totally different. But with that, I was lucky enough to get it done and get licensed, and then be ready for the next one, which was how about starting a new business? And that one, actually, it's a big learning curve, not just for me as a international practitioner here, but also for anyone who wants to start a business. Because when you work in a firm, it's mostly just designing, documentation, and get it done. And usually you have some other people who are taking care of the business side of that practice. But now handling everything together, marketing, business development, legal stuff, and also designing documentation and executing the project, it's quite challenging. But along the way, the good thing about having a mentor is that person can help you to understand, and actually that person can help you to transfer the knowledge because they've been through this before and they know how to do it more efficient and in a better way. For me, that was a great opportunity to learn from other people, especially for my career development, other than the personal life that I had here. So, yeah, I'm happy to share anything else, but yeah, that was my journey so far.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's great. I mean, Johannes, I know you and I think, as I said, had some similar experiences. Again, we're not immigration lawyers. We don't really want to kind of go down a dangerous path of recommending or advising on anything. But did you have any issues when you came over here? I mean, not having gone to school, I guess you were at Cornell, but not having gone through sort of, like NC State with Foad and Marsha. I know for myself, my visa was through my partner, through my wife, and so I was able to get a work permit. Did you have any other challenges with regards to finding work, or were any sort of visa obstacles that you had?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, what happened with me was that I've most of my career I have spent at smaller offices or studios, and when I started to plan to come here, I mean, not having gone through NC State, that's a whole network that I don't have, right? So it's kind of somewhat funny, but like my ex-partner's father was a veterinarian here in Raleigh, and he had architect clients, and so for example Frank Harmon was one of his clients, and so I got connected step by step to kind of local architects and building connections. But what became somewhat clear relatively quickly is that those firms and the people I talked to and at the scale they were operating are not necessarily the ones that will provide work visas for foreigners that come here that they, to be frank, like hardly know. And so there was a point when I just had to accept that getting a work visa was maybe a little bit too cumbersome, and that's when my ex-partner and I started to talk about going a family visa route, which is what we did. And yeah, we didn't just get married because of the visa, but we would have probably chosen a different time. And so yeah, so that was kind of a challenge that in my case I was gratefully able to resolve otherwise. But
yeah, I mean, I know from my own experience, it was, and I think you mentioned there about the networks. That's something I've certainly, thought about a little bit over the last few years. I don't have a very wide peer network within architecture here, not having gone to school. Not, obviously, I know the folks within my office, but I haven't doing other things, life taking over, what have you. I've been sort of very focused on my own sort of personal work rather than sort of building that network. So I think that's an important thing. Perhaps if there's folks on the call who are looking for some ideas, I think you hit on a good thing there about trying to build that network and trying to, as much as you can, sort of draw in people from outside of the firms that you're working for, or the firms that you're speaking with. That certainly helps. Marsha, is there anything else that, we already touched on mentorship and sort of some of your experiences there. Is there anything you would sort of go back and tell your younger self, before you start this journey to the US and to Little? Is there anything that you look back on and say, hey, maybe you should think about doing this? This would really help.
Well, I want to piggyback on what you said about network and then answer that question if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I realized was one of the help or the driving force is connecting with your network. And I think sometimes as architects, we tend to be a little bit insular and not realize that our network could also be a little bit more expansive. So I have a network of Caribbean people who know somebody. We have this thing where somebody knows somebody. And if you need something, then who knows? And so that network for us became a culturally based network as well as a professional based network. So I've had friends who know that I'm here and they would connect with me, and they're architects as well. And they would say, hey, Marsha, at the time where I was in Florida, I connected them with someone else who was in Florida, and they got a job. And so your network might not necessarily only be within your profession to connect you with what this country would offer. And so for me, I realized that I didn't do that earlier on. So when I moved here, I didn't quite know anybody, and so I wasn't as outgoing as I am now. And so it took me a little bit longer to figure out things versus connecting with someone who might be able to assist. I started to lean on my professors. I started to lean on, I was doing some volunteer work, and actually one of my friends who I met, who's here on the call, who is also not an architect, and we had some great conversations while I was trying to figure myself out. So I'm shouting out to you, David. And so the network is very important. And the thing that I would have told my younger self was to get plugged in earlier on. And I say this to my students, and I say this to the people in my office. You have just left school. That is a very great time for you from in school to out of school, that first year, to immerse yourself in organization. I started joining these organizations 20 to 25 years later after I got to this country. So I connected with NOMA, I connected with AIA, I started to connect with construction people and builders and home builders, and just starting to learn a little bit more about what the opportunities could be. And I started to talk more with people. I started calling up friends who I went to school with, and some were still in the Caribbean, some had moved here to the US, and started conversation. And those conversations helped to inform some of my decisions now, but I wish I'd started earlier.
Yeah, Foad, is there anything you'd like to add to that? I do have another question for you in a second, but I wanted to give you an opportunity if there's anything there that you could add to Marsha's comment.
No, I think that's a great point about networking and have a network here, not just for your profession, but also for your community here. So for me, it was very helpful to have a Iranian American community here that helped us with everything to just learn about everything in a very fast way, because as Marsha said, if you want to find out something by yourself, probably takes longer. So I'm sure there will be some people that will help you and have done that before. The other thing was, for me, it was quite challenging. Having a plan is always helpful for everything, especially here that's as an immigrant. There are a lot of things that you cannot control, and it's out of your control. For example, the visa process, that you're switching from student to work visa. For me, at the time, the architecture program that NC State had wasn't a STEM program. So that meant that we just had like 1 year as a student to work, and then we had to switch to work visa. That was quite stressful and challenging because the work visa here in the US is usually a lottery system, and there's like 50% chance that you get it or not. But having a plan B is always helpful for you. For me, it was like, okay, what if I don't get this visa? So what's the plan B? Which probably is not the plan that you want to move forward with, but it's always helpful to have something if the plan A didn't work the way that you want it. But again, same thing with license is, for me, getting a license was quite challenging because having a full-time job and also studying for your license, especially that English is not your first language. I know that AIA has some initiatives for students or people who English is not their first language, like giving them some extra time with the exams, or you can bring something with you to the exam and use it. Those are things that I learned from other people who did this before, and they told me that it's not like you need to just force yourself to do this. There are some things that you can take advantage of. But other than that, I think going back to the mentorship, the other great benefit of that is when you have a mentor, you have a great opportunity to networking with other people, because that person usually has that connection and they can introduce you to a broader community that will be very helpful for your future, especially in architecture profession.
Can I, sorry, just Foad, you said something that reminded me of something I learned recently. I don't know, when was it when you tried to switch from student to work visa? What year was that?
Around 2017.
Okay, because I was recently researching a little bit into the more recent success rate of firms trying to get work visas for their employees. And there was a pretty big shift a few years ago from the time that you mentioned, when it was somewhat of a 50-50 lottery. And what I learned is there was an article, I think, in the Wall Street Journal, if I remember correctly, or Financial Times. I don't fully know, but and you can look it up in the in the in the USCIS kind of statistics, even online, the current success rate of applications for work visas in architecture, or like in general, are like in the 90s. So I'm just saying that because employers might have an experience from the past, and it might seem like, oh, we're spending all this money and then we don't even know if we get these people through. And I think nowadays those chances are very, very good to get your application through. And I mean, if anybody says otherwise, I can provide some links.
I think the good thing about that is if your architecture program at school is a STEM program, you have 3 years after graduation you have time 3 years to change your student visa to work visa. But if it's not a STEM program, you just have 1 year, which is very risky and stressful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I wanted to leave a little bit of time for some questions, and so I wanted to sort of just open this up for the panel. Just anything else to add in addition to that conversation there, but if not, we'll I guess we'll throw it up with some questions from the audience, and we have a little bit of time. So yeah, does anybody have any questions for any of us or any of the panel?
I just have a quick comment. I wanted to say thank you guys for at least opening my eyes to your journey through this whole process, because I was not really aware, and it's encouraging. Even though Foad is licensed and others are about to, hopefully, but it's encouraging to see that you guys are doing well in what you're doing in your profession. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you, Terry. I will say this. I know, as you mentioned, there were some of us are at different stages. I got licensed in 2018. One thing that, and I think it's a little bit like a lot of life decisions and life choices, right? You kind of think, hey, I've got, I don't have the time, or I don't have the resources, or whatever it is. When I got licensed here after being in the US for about 5 years, we just had our first child, and our first child was, must have been a couple of years old, and we had plans to have another. And I thought, if I don't do this now, if I don't get licensed now, there's no way I'm going to be able to find the time with 2 kids. And so, that was a motivating factor for me. But it is challenging, right? And it is, you've got to be disciplined. And I think that's just hopefully something that, hopefully through all of our different stories, we've kind of been able to share some of that. I mean, I think it's about intention, and just like lots of things in life. So it can happen. It might take some time. It might take a little longer. Life takes you on. I never thought that I would be living in the US, at this point. So, it's kind of crazy, and again, just I think being open and being available to the changes in opportunities and seizing those is sort of really important and critical. So, thank you, Terry, for your comment there.
And if I can, sorry, just
yeah.
Thank you, Terry. That reminds me, I just wanted to mention that too. The reason why I'm not licensed is not because I didn't get the right support from my employers. It's more technical than that right now. But I also, there was a lot of, I think, individual kind of support that I received of just like people understanding the situation and being like, okay, we understand it's harder for you to get that right now, and we're not gonna make this a requirement for your employment. And so that I think is part of the story too, is that in a certain way, and forgive me, I mean, I believe that the licensure structure is not bad, but like I also, to be perfectly frank, like don't feel like I can't do my job right now because I'm not licensed. That doesn't mean I still want to get licensed, but
Thanks for that clarification. And Dan, sorry, I missed you when you said you were licensed earlier.
No, I'm not. I didn't want to jump in there and like try and no. I just wanted to make to Johannes's point there, I think, you know, we were able in our journeys to sort of, I don't think it's hindering. It didn't hinder me. It was more of a, hey, if I don't do this now, I might never have the opportunity, or it might take some time in the future. So no worries. I see, unless Marsha or Foad has anything to add there, I see David had his hand up, so we'll come to David. Oh, I think you're muted. Let me see if I can can't mute him. Sorry. Jasmine, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, it says you can't unmute somebody. Sorry. So if you want to just read his comment, I think he had his question was in the chat. He also put it there.
If licensures make architecture better, if anybody knows.
There you go. Maybe that's sort of that's a good build onto the conversation there. I mean, let's talk about it. I mean, I think Marsha, I mean, you know, obviously you've been working for a long time, and as we mentioned, as part of your story, you know, your experience has really sort of helped you, and your community and cultural sort of experience have really helped you push yourself forward, both in research as well as in practice. So, you know, is licensure important? Does it make us better?
It's interesting. I'll jump in by saying this. I decided after 2020 to get my license. I had experience before in the whole AXP process that got expired. I think I'd gotten to a couple thousands of hours, and I had to restart again. And so since 2020 to now, I will be finished this year, my hours. So prior to that, I was in the architecture space and the cultural space, talking about from a more historic and cultural landscape. So having those discussions, engaging within communities, engaging within the architecture space. And for me, the question of licensure might not be as immediate and urgent, because I've been in the spaces where I have influenced and I have had the conversations. I've consulted. I did a project in Jamaica where we consulted a commercial space and did research for that. And that was the basis of what the architects used to design a whole town. And I've done town planning and city planning, in addition to historic preservation and having discussions and facilitating those type of conversations, and I've taught. So for me, licensure is one of those things where I get to I guess not only check the box, but to fulfill something that I know that I can make more of a difference with having that under my belt. So it's a very interesting question, and this is why we all have different journeys. I'm pretty certain that every single one of us didn't stop engaging in the field of architecture because, oh, we don't have a piece of paper, I'm just going to stay in my corner and do nothing. We continued our lives. We connected with people. We grew, and we're at different stages of that, and that's one of the things that's super important. And just another thing, my oldest is in college, and it was after he started going to college, I decided to go and jump back into architecture and get my license. So there's so many different stories that we all have.
Yeah, it's funny because I had a friend who was joking about this and was saying, "Do you think having a driver license makes you a better driver?" But we know that's two different things. For me, studying for my license helped me a lot to understand the architecture as a profession, as a practice, not just designing buildings. Because you get a hint about how you should manage the practice, how you should manage the project, how you should do construction administration. And usually when we talk about architecture, we focus on just the design portion of it, but actually it's more than that. And as an architect, we all need to learn about that too. That was the great thing for me about studying for my license and getting licensed, that now I know that's other section, what's going on there. I learned a lot more about it.
Yeah, great. David, I know you can't speak. Did that answer your question? Any? Okay.
I mean, I will say one more thing, and I'm going to use Spain because I'm not affiliated with that country. But, you know, I think I said it earlier, like in Spain, the process, at least it used to be like that. There might have been changes that I'm not aware of, but the process used to be that your last project in school is basically treated as a real world project. So you have to figure out MEP, figure out engineering, structural engineering, like all these things. And it's a complex multi-year thesis in the end. And that is problematic for other reasons. But at the end of that, you are licensed. You don't have to collect hours. You don't have to take 5 exams. And I would just generally say, and I think I mean, just from my point of view, architecture in Spain is not worse than in the US. I would say maybe it's better. But so it is a very interesting question. I think in Germany and then therefore also in Spain, the registration or the licensing requirements are put to the schools, right? So if you already have a licensed program and your teachers should not pass you if you don't understand the subjects or like have learned what you needed to learn, then I think in theory you should come out of school and know enough. But I also understand that that's not true. Like I see what Foad said about, you know, there's so much about the real practice of architecture that maybe doesn't get taught in school for good or bad reasons. So I'm personally kind of like interested in taking the exams because I want to learn, but I can't even get to the point where I'm allowed to take the exams right now.
Yeah, I think, and your experience there, Johannes, is similar to the UK, and maybe Marsha, maybe in Jamaica as well. I mean, obviously we have the RIDA, you know, obviously the Royal Institute of British Architects, and so the way that the licensure registration works there is that you undertake a project and do a thesis, you know, a real world project within your office. And the examination process is an open book exam. It's a 2-day open book exam. And so you essentially sit down within the office that you're working, and you're moderated by the person that you work for, your boss or whoever. And then within that exam, you're allowed to, you know, there's a question or a subject relating to cost. You're allowed to, you know, call up a cost consultant and have a conversation. As long as you document that process and the answer through that, you know, how you derive to the answer. And then after all of the, you know, it's a more sort of an essay type question rather than a multiple choice series of questions, you know, that are really more testing memory to some degree and sort of retained knowledge. And after all of that, you then go for an interview. And so there's more of a sort of a peer review and peer sort of examine process whereby the industry itself is, you know, somewhat, you know, saying whether or not this person is adequate to be within the industry. But I will say that, you know, there have been some issues recently in the UK, if you're familiar with the Grenfell disaster, whereby clearly there are some gaps within the industry, and now whether that gets into licensure is probably a much deeper, wider topic. But I certainly think there are some gaps there that maybe, you know, by self-regulating to some degree is problematic. And I think it doesn't necessarily, at least it didn't when I was doing my examinations and my licensure back in 2010. It didn't necessarily touch on some of the wider societal sort of challenges, perhaps, that we may have talked about and looked at in the whatever it is now, 6-7 exams that are here in the US. So yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I mean, I definitely didn't enjoy doing the exams here. It's not a natural way of testing that I'm used to, which I think is more ingrained within the US system here. And actually, sorry, David, I just saw your chat come in here. Licensure helps buildings to be legally verified objects, which may be very important in a complex society like the US. Yeah, I mean, I think there is some of that, right? It's legalistically, it is a different. It offers some different challenges to practice here in the US than it certainly does in where I'm from, the UK. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would echo that in terms of what I've learned in Germany practicing architecture, or Spain, especially like technical things, but also, quite honestly, just the approach to some of the process of creating architecture. I mean, not a lot of that really translates one-to-one. I did feel like I had to relearn and adjust a lot of my knowledge to the US.
Yeah, I mean, and also I had to learn feet and inches, right? I mean, it's a language. It's kind of strange, when I moved here, I would convert everything in my head and try and figure through that from the metric system to the what we call the imperial system. But again, it sort of sounds like a silly thing, but it's a language. It's something that you internally in your head, you have an understanding conceptually of something, and you have to then be able to apply something different, albeit you're trying to do the same thing but with a different set of parameters.
I'm working with Australian team members now, and it's very interesting to even between two English-speaking countries how different the language is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the other thing about the license is, when I was studying for my license, I could clearly see the gap between what I learned at school and what I need to study for my exam. Maybe if we learned some of those stuff at school, the license wouldn't be this big deal right now. It's almost very challenging for everybody. The gap between the technical, the management, the practice management stuff that I think we should learn at school at some level. But unfortunately, that's sometimes is a missing part of our school and education. But thank you, David, for asking the great question.
I agree with the learning gap. It's actually, I'm studying for the exam, and I'm doing the exams, and I am also resolving my learning experience with having to understand what these questions are asking. And so it's very interesting, because many of us we have stories, no matter where we have practiced. We have stories of nights with studio, with history, architecture history, with graphics, with learning the software, but we don't have and then everybody would say, oh, but I only had one class in professional practice. So that seems to be a constant conversation that I've had, throughout the years, of the learning gap. And in studying for the exams, I'm realizing, oh, there's so much I still don't know. Not because I don't have experience, not because I didn't go to school. There's so much that I don't know because the exams are asking for things that might not have come across my path. And I think, to your point, that we should resolve that and bring back those exams, those learning objectives, and bring it and incorporate it in our architectural programs. I think it would make for us to have, one, better architects, and two, us better equipped to handle these exams that we do have to do to become licensed.
Well, I guess we're right at 1 o'clock. If there's any last minute questions, then please feel free. But otherwise, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you guys. It's been great moderating this and being part of this conversation. Thank you to NC NOMA for hosting. If anyone has any questions afterwards, I mean, feel free. You know, as I said, trying to grow our networks here. Feel free to reach out. I mean, this is not about kind of keeping this in house, right? This is kind of why we're here talking about this stuff. So hopefully it's been helpful. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, our moderators and our panelists. I like you said, Dan, I don't want to reiterate, but it's all about the network that you bring. I think that was a common theme across all the panelists and you, panel moderator, that the network that you build of support from your peers in this area is really what makes the difference. So if our panelists are open to it, it'd be great if we could share your email addresses with folks in attendance. We can connect offline, and then I can maybe share those email addresses to our attendees later on. But I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their day.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.